From the dawn of time, the earth has whispered its secrets. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Kingdoms have vanished into dust. And yet, certain prophecies have never faded. They wait, like seeds beneath the soil, for the appointed season. Today, we step into one of the most mysterious and ancient prophecies ever recorded. One that speaks of a flawless creature, born only once in generations, destined to play a role in the rebuilding of the most sacred site in history, the Temple of Jerusalem. This is the prophecy of the Perfect Red Heifer. The command of the Red Heifer, the story begins over 3,000 years ago, in the pages of the Hebrew Scriptures. In the book of Numbers, chapter 19, God gives Moses a specific, almost puzzling command. The people of Israel are told to bring a completely red, unblemished heifer, a young female cow that has never been yoked for work. This animal was to be slaughtered and burned outside the camp. Its ashes, mixed with water, were used for ritual purification. But not just any cow would do. The law was clear. It had to be entirely red, with no more than 2 non-red hairs. No scars, no injuries, no imperfections. It could never have been used for labor. To many, it was just a strange ceremonial law. But to the ancient Israelites, it was deeply significant. Without the ashes of the red heifer, no one could be purified to enter the temple of God. Purity and the presence of God. In ancient Israel, purity wasn't just about physical cleanliness. It was about spiritual readiness. The temple was the dwelling place of God's presence, the very heart of their faith. But there was a problem. Impurity was inevitable. Contact with death! Even being under the same roof as a corpse made someone unclean. The ashes of the red heifer were the only way to restore purity. This was not a frequent ritual. Rabbis throughout history have noted that only 9 red heifers were ever prepared from the time of Moses until the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, and here lies the heart of the prophecy. The prophecy of the 10th heifer, Jewish tradition, recorded in the Mishnah, teaches something fascinating. According to Maimonides, the great medieval Jewish scholar, there will only be 10 perfect red heifers in all of history. The 10th, he wrote, will be prepared by the Messiah himself. Think about that. For over 2,000 years, there has been no red heifer, no purification, and no temple. And yet, in the shadow of the ancient city of Jerusalem, believers have waited for the 10th scene change. Slow zoom into the western wall, sounds of wind and distant prayer. Narrator, for centuries, this has been the longing, to see the temple restored, to see the prophecy fulfilled. But such a thing cannot begin without the heifer. The temple that once was. To understand the weight of this prophecy, you must understand the temple itself. The first temple, built by King Solomon, stood as a marvel of architecture and devotion. It was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. The second temple was later built, expanded under King Herod, and stood during the time of Jesus. It was here that priests offered sacrifices, that worshippers brought offerings, that the high priest entered the Holy of Holies once a year to atone for the sins of the nation. And yet, in 70 AD, the Roman Empire crushed a Jewish revolt and burned the temple to the ground. Since then, the site has remained without a temple. Why this matters now? To many modern viewers, this is just history. But for millions of Jews, and for Christians who study biblical prophecy, the temple's rebuilding is not just a dream. It is a sign of the end of the age. The red heifer isn't just a curious law from ancient times. It is the first step in a prophetic chain of events that could lead to the construction of the third temple, a moment that some believe will mark the approach of the Messianic age, and others see as the opening act of apocalyptic events described in the book of Revelation. And so, the search for the perfect heifer is more than agriculture. It is a countdown clock, soft fade. Image of a calf in a sunlit field for centuries. Finding a red heifer that met every biblical requirement seemed impossible. Even a single white hair disqualified it. And yet, believers never stopped watching, never stopped waiting. For them, this was not just about an animal. It was about destiny. And now, in our generation, something has happened that has set the prophetic world on fire. Narrator leaning in, lower tone. After 2 millennia, a perfect red heifer has been found. But before we tell that part of the story, we must first understand how modern Israel has prepared for this moment, and why the announcement sent shockwaves through religious communities worldwide. The Hebrew scriptures and the writings of the prophets have long foretold a future temple, one that will stand in Jerusalem as a focal point of worship and a symbol of God's presence among his people. The first temple, built by King Solomon, was a marvel of its time, ornate, sacred, and central to the Jewish faith. It was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. The second temple rose decades later under Zerubbabel and was later expanded by King Herod into a magnificent structure, only to be destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE for nearly 2,000 years. The Jewish people have mourned the loss of the temple, remembering its destruction on the same date each year to see a B'Av and yearning for the day of its restoration. Narrator. But prophecy does not remain locked in the past. It speaks, it waits, it breathes through the ages. And for some, the birth of a perfect red heifer is a sign that the appointed time draws near. Why the red heifer matters now, the Torah. Specifically, in Numbers 9, commands that a flawless red cow be sacrificed and its ashes mixed with water to create the water of purification. This ritual is not symbolic, it is essential. According to biblical law, anyone who is ritually impure, especially those who have come into contact with death, cannot participate in temple worship until purified with this sacred water. Without the ashes of a red heifer, even if the temple were built tomorrow, no one could serve within its courts according to the law. That's why, in prophetic circles, the arrival of a qualifying heifer isn't just interesting, it's globalize on Jerusalem in recent years. Organizations like the Temple Institute in Jerusalem have been actively searching for the perfect heifer. They have even partnered with cattle breeders worldwide, including in the United States, to locate and transport such animals to Israel. The news of one or more heifers meeting the biblical standard has ignited conversations across religious communities. In Jewish thought, it's a step toward the fulfillment of messianic prophecy. In Christian eschatology, particularly among those who study end-times prophecy, it has a signal that we are moving closer to the events described in the books of Daniel, Matthew, and Revelation. For many Muslims, it touches on their own eschatological beliefs regarding the end of days. Narrator. Jerusalem has always been more than a city. It is a spiritual epicenter magnate for faith, conflict, and hope. The Temple Mount, where the third temple would rise, is one of the most contested pieces of real estate in the world. And now, with the appearance of a perfect red heifer, the currents of prophecy seem to flow with renewed force. The political earthquake, the Temple Mount, is not just a religious sit-it, is the most contested piece of ground on earth. Any talk of rebuilding the temple sends shockwaves through the political world. Muslims regard the site as Al-Haram al-Sharif, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Jews see it as Har Habayit, the site of the first and second temples and the place where God's presence once dwelled. The idea of re-establishing temple worship, even if only ceremonial, every fault line in the Middle East. It raises questions of sovereignty, religious rights, and the balance of fragile peace agreements. Narrator! And now, with a perfect red heifer standing ready, the conversation has shifted from if to when. And that when could change everything. A global, spiritual signal for Bible students around the world. The red heifer is more than an animal, it's a prophetic alarm bell. In Christian prophecy, many interpret the rebuilding of the temple as a key event that precedes the rise of the Antichrist, the Great Tribulation, and the return of Jesus Christ. For devout Jews, it marks the dawn of the Messianic era, a time of peace and divine justice. For Muslims, It aligns with their own eschatological traditions concerning the final days and the return of Isa Jesus and the Mahdi. A single animal grazing in the hills of Israel becomes a thread woven into the tapestry of global expectation. The spiritual divide, but prophecy has always been a double-edged sword. For some, this moment is filled with joy, hope, and holy anticipation. For others, it stirs fear, suspicion, and even anger. Critics warn that forcing prophetic fulfillment could ignite conflict. Skeptics dismiss it as religious sensationalism. Yet for the faithful, the signs are too clear to ignore. Narrator. Prophecy does not wait for the approval of men. When the time comes, it will move whether the world is ready or not. The call to watch and prepare. The birth and approval of the red heifer may be the first page of the next chapter in God's prophetic plan. Whether the third temple is months, years, or decades away, the sign has been given. Now, the question is not, when will it happen? But will you be ready when it does? Closing scene. The music swells as the camera pans over the Temple Mount at sunset, the golden light bathing the stones. The narrator's voice softens but carries a weight that lingers. Narrator. The perfect red heifer walks under the watchful eye of history. The Temple Mount waits in silence, and the prophecies spoken thousands of years ago are moving once again. The earth is trembling. Are you listening?